Hello and welcome back to Exothermic Plays Games. I'm Exothermic and the date today is Monday, September 16th, 2024. I've been doing a countdown of my favorite video games of all time through each day of the year, and it's a very special day, because today I'm talking about a game that completely changed the trajectory of my gaming life. Today I'm talking about my 107th favorite game, Final Fantasy XI. The title indicates that Final Fantasy XI released in 2002, and that's true, in Japan. The North American release was almost a full year later, and my first exposure was June 16th, 2004. I know the exact date because the game and the laptop we played it on was a birthday gift for my older brother. This is the first massively multiplayer online game in the Final Fantasy franchise, and if we discount the likes of Neopets, the first MMO I ever played. Side note, Neopets is under new management and apparently they're making improvements on restoring the game's functionality after the death of Flash. Someone remind me to dive into that next year when this project is done. In Final Fantasy XI, or as my brothers and I like to call it, Flevin, you play as a warrior of light in the world of Vana'diel. Like many MMOs, you make your character, you select your race, and choose a starting class, or since this is a Final Fantasy game, job. Unlike most games, however, you're not making new characters to check out each different job anytime you want to try something new. Instead, you'll be able to swap them around whenever you want, or at least close enough to whenever you want. There are 5 races in Flevin, and each have their own strengths and weaknesses. There's Hume, which as it sounds is basically humans, then Elvan, which again are the elves they sound like. The remaining 3 are less obvious. Mithra are a race of cat-like people that for players are exclusively female, though there are males that don't go out adventuring. Galka, however, are big, bulky, well, you could look at them. They're technically asexual and reincarnate rather than reproduce. The absolute best race of any game ever made, though, is the Taru. They are adorable, tiny little people that make phenomenal spellcasters, and just like, look at them run, and look at them panic. God, they're so cute, I just want to smush their little faces. So yeah, my character was a Taru. Back in the day, he was named Syrup, and then I had another one named Waffles. That being said, the video you're seeing here is not from when I played before, of course, and it's not my account. I haven't played this game in almost 20 years, but did you know it's still going? They still make content for this game, despite having a newer MMO on the market within the same franchise. As I said, I don't play it anymore, but my twin brother does, so he recorded all of this for me. His character is a Hume, the basic bitch. Just kidding, love you. Thanks for recording and sharing a birthday with me and whatnot. Anyways, at the time I was playing the game, your account cost a subscription, and then you paid extra money for each character you had beyond the first. I was like 10, so I wasn't paying for any of that. My older brother paid for all of it, and we shared the one account, the 3 of us. That did mean, however, that we were basically stuck with the one character per person at the time, for the most part. I have no idea what my twin brother pays now, or if he even does. It was fine to be stuck with one character though, because you could change your job whenever you wanted. The job system has come in many forms over the course of the franchise, and I think Final Fantasy XI does it better than all of the others, and it's not very close at all. You start with 6 standard jobs: Warrior, Thief, Monk, White Mage, Black Mage, and Red Mage. There are 16 other jobs you can start unlocking after you hit level 30, however. I say start unlocking because it's not what I would describe as simple or easy. Each one has a pretty large quest line that you have to follow to unlock the job, and many of these will force you to travel throughout the whole world, doing all sorts of crazy stuff, and will often require the help of friends. What makes the job system so brilliant in Final Fantasy XI, however, isn't just the number of options available. It's the combinations. Starting at level 18, when you select your job, you also select a sub-job, which gives you bonuses and abilities from whichever one you select. Your sub-job is always at most half the level of your main job, but you do need to level both in order to keep up. At the time, the level cap in the game was 75, so that meant for a level 75 monk with a warrior sub-job, you'd want to get a warrior to at least 37. Your choice of sub-job can drastically change what you're capable of in the game, providing huge changes in utility, survivability, or combo potential. More on those later. But your race actually changes a lot for how you have to prepare your character. While there are significant differences per race, the game is set up in a way that every race can be successful with every job. For example, if you're wanting to play a tank character, you might play as Paladin with Warrior sub-job. A seemingly obvious choice there would be the Galka, because it has the highest health pool and base defenses. And you'd be right, it works well, despite your low MP resources, making the white magic you have access to from Paladin a little limited. On the flip side, you might think that Taru would be awful Paladins because they actually have very small health pools and defense stats. However, you'd be wrong. For a Paladin's purposes, the Taru's MP might as well be infinite, and you can even equip gear and use items that convert MP to health, shoring up your weaknesses. That's just one example of how the character creation and modification processes for the game are so interesting to explore. There's way more, including wanting specific combos for even just individual fights. Speaking of fighting, I should probably explain the combat. If you're used to more modern MMOs, the combat in Final Fantasy XI is going to feel very slow, but it's also highly strategic, especially when you're in a group. The game was not only on PC, but also PlayStation 2, and was designed to be equally compatible with both, with full communication across multiple languages. That is mind-blowing. But yeah, the combat is slow as hell, which to some people, that's a bonus. Now is probably the time to mention that I never reached max level. In fact, I never got close. When my brothers and I were playing this game, we had one account and one computer that could run the game, so we all had to share. It was of course my older brother's laptop, so he could spend as much time on it as he wanted, but he was admittedly pretty generous with allowing us time to play. Between myself and my twin brother, he definitely enjoyed the game more, so I let him have more of our time with that while I did other stuff like Guitar Hero or whatever. My highest level job was a level 40 black or red mage. I honestly forget which I did more of at the time. I definitely played both, but I forget which one I leveled higher. When we moved into a larger, more popular MMO that would then proceed to change my life in many, 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 many ways. So yeah, I'm going to miss some nuance to higher level combat, but I did watch my brothers do a good amount of it, and videos online as well. If you do want that deep dive, however, check out my audio podcast recording reminiscing with my twin brother about the game that I also uploaded today. The link is in the description. For much of the game, melee combat consists of standing in front of the enemy and, well, hitting it. Slowly. You build up a resource called Tactical Points, or TP, which you could spend on different job skills or weapon skills. As you gain proficiency with different types of weapons, you'd gain levels with it, and at certain levels, you'd learn different special attacks you could use. Similarly, spellcasting in this game was slower than in many of its competitors, which did mean you had to identify what you needed to cast more in advance, which admittedly made for a really great triage system for healing jobs. The solo for the game is something you'll need to get used to doing, especially for certain story-related things or quests to unlock different jobs, but understand that this game really takes the multiplayer in MMO to heart. The vast majority of gameplay pretty much has to be done in groups, including leveling parties being totally superior to playing alone. Parties in Final Fantasy XI are done in 6-player groups, and there's a handful of roles you'll need to have taken care of. For experienced parties, you're focusing on fighting enemies that are several levels higher than you to gain massive experience bonuses that get split across the party. The party would set up in a secluded area away from enemy spawns so they can kill their target without fear of getting interrupted. You'd need a puller, which could be basically anyone that can attack an enemy from a very long range, and keep attacking it to leash it along to the rest of the group. From my memory, this was most often a ranger, but it wasn't required to be. Anyone could do it if they could just make a ranged attack. Of course, you need at least one healer, but it didn't hurt to have an off healer like a red mage or someone with a white mage sub job. Importantly, you'd need a tank, someone to take the brunt of the damage to protect the rest of the party. There's a handful of jobs that can handle tanking in Final Fantasy XI, and they do it in a lot of different ways. It might be pure damage mitigation, it might be avoidance with minimal mitigation, it might be self-healing, it might even be a combination. Thanks to the sub-job system, tanks in particular can really craft their own playstyle between sub-jobs and how different the playable races can be, as I talked about with the example about paladins and Tarus. Misra's high base agility, for example, makes for great ninjas who tank through avoidance. More often, ninjas a sub-job for tanks though. The rest of the party is damage dealers just plugging away at the foe, though somewhere in that mix you want someone playing an additional support role even secondarily as a sub-job, keeping up buffs and things on everyone. In fact, back in the day, the job I wanted to do really late game content with was Red Mage, who in the hardest fights in the game does almost nothing but throw out buffs to everyone. Some of that does, of course, depend on your party composition. If you want to hear a lot more about some of the Red Mage stuff, my brother and I do talk about that a lot, that is what he plays in endgame stuff today. In a party setting, that's where the nuance of the combat starts to really shine. Interactions with different jobs and party compositions can completely change your strategy. The big way you kill enemies much stronger than you is through chaining combos. There's a few different ways to do this, but a lot of it is through the chain system. You can have skill chains by stringing together specific combinations of weapon skills, causing stacking bonus damage throughout. Additionally, as I usually played a spellcaster, you can do magic bursts. Each skill chain has a different element tied to it, and if you layer on a spell of that element immediately after the skill chain, you could create a magic burst, which basically worked as an extra spell, sort of, that hits the enemy for massive damage. Some damage dealing jobs just like to do damage and call it a day. Others, like Samurai or Bard, like to do lots of setup for these combos, utilizing integral starting abilities to kick off everyone else's payoffs. Every job can do something really unique and cool, and it keeps coming back to the job system and how great it is. There's another element to jobs I haven't touched on yet, and it's maybe the most exciting. There's something called 2-hour abilities. These are extremely powerful abilities that, as the name implies, have a cooldown of 2 whole hours. I don't mean in the game time where night and day move much faster, I mean in real time. Remember, the pacing of this game is really slow. You'll take a few minutes, possibly, between every couple of fights as a party to rest up, recover HP and MP, and rebuff. Some examples of 2-hour abilities include straightforward effects like Bard's Soul Voice, which makes your songs, the whole point of playing the job, twice as effective for a short while, or Ranger's Eagle Eye Shot, which is literally just a single really strong attack. Others, however, have more nuance to them, like Samurai's ability, which makes it so rather than using your entire TP bar when you use a weapon skill, it fills it and then makes them only use 1/3 of it. This means that when done properly, Samurai was the only job in the game that could use skill chains entirely on their own. Apparently there's been updates to the game in the 18-ish years since I stopped playing that allow other jobs to do this, but it was a cool thing just for Samurai back in the day. The game is filled with cool little things like that, and there's a reason to play every job. Obviously you can't fit them all in one party, or can you? For really big fights, you can combine 3 parties into one mega party called an alliance. While there's more than 18 jobs in the game, between primary jobs and sub-jobs, everything is likely to be covered at least once. Being that I stopped at around level 40, I never got to experience any of this, but it always seemed pretty cool, and admittedly, way too hardcore for me. I remember seeing something about a new endgame boss fight at the time, dragging on for something like 30 hours or whatever for the first global kill. I don't mean like they released it and then 30 hours later it got killed. I mean they released it, people found it, people figured out certain stuff about it, and then the first kill from first pull to kill took 30 hours. It required several alliances rotating characters in with fresh 2 hours constantly because the boss would use that 2 hour and then you'd have to immediately fire off the same one. Just absolutely wild stuff. While combat is an important thing in any MMO, it's not the only thing. The world itself is pretty big, and traveling is actually a very big deal in this game. If you're going somewhere, be prepared to take a while, but know that the journey is part of the fun. Depending on where you want to go, you may need to take boats, airships, teleporters to the middle of nowhere but still closer than where you started, rent chocobos and ride for like 20 minutes, or even a combination of all of those things. One of the most fascinating parts of the game to me is that there are ways to find interesting things in every element, even the boring stuff. Stuck on a boat, which by the way is very far from being a glorified cutscene. Good time to get some fishing in, or better yet, maybe pirates or a rare sea monster boss will spawn and attack the ship. Get all hands on deck and take it out, or, die. Speaking of, dying is definitely a setback in this game, and is the main reason that if I was on a boat with my low-level Taru, I stayed in the hold, where I was safe the whole time. You see, if you die, you lose some of your experience, and by some, I mean 10% of your current level's maximum experience, which in endgame content is quite a lot. This can actually cause you to level down if you drop below the start of your current level. Even in absolute bleeding edge endgame content, you could level down and then have to go kill some stuff to level up again. While dead, you can wait a bit to see if someone can cast Raise on you, resurrecting you where you're at and reducing the experience loss penalty, but otherwise you're stuck spawning at a previously designated area and having to travel back to where you were. Forgot to change that area after traveling halfway around the world? Sucks to be you, and I also feel bad for your party. The extent to which traveling is a pain in the ass is actually, I think, an endearing part of the game, making the world feel alive and extremely immersive. There's a lot of elements that focus on immersion, from interactions with players to the non-player characters running around major cities. You can do little fetch quests for them and work up within the ranks of your chosen starting kingdom. Honestly, I always found accessing the story to this game rather tedious though. I've heard it gets pretty good once you're a couple expansions in, but I have absolutely no idea what the overall story is. I didn't get really to it at all, even though I played this game for like 2 years, technically. That is in part because I was 10 and didn't care about the political intrigue elements, but also because it felt like work to even find the story. Even just turning in quest items is meant to be immersive. You have to offer a trade to the NPC just like you would a player, and then propose a trade with the quest items. Character dialogue and other important text are in the main text box, which is a bit annoying to have to sift through that along with everything else in there. But speaking of the text box, the chat system in this game is actually one of the greatest things it does. Remember, this is meant to be playable on a PlayStation 2? There are a ton of pre-made phrases and keywords you can input into the chat, and if you use those, they automatically translate into whatever language each player is using. This means I could party with, most often, Japanese players and still be able to play totally fine with them despite not speaking Japanese and them maybe not speaking English. It's awesome. Plus, if you're not a fast typer, the search function for these phrases is pretty robust, so it might actually be faster than typing it out. Not an issue for me, but, maybe to someone. There's a lot more ways for people to interact than just partying and talking, though. There's a robust economy system in this game focused heavily on the auction house. That's certainly not unique to Final Fantasy XI amongst MMOs, but there are a few additional wrinkles here. On the auction house, you can buy most things, though some items aren't tradable. This is most often where you get your gear upgrades, at least before doing big questline rewards at late stages of the game, and this is how you learn new spells for spellcasters. Enemies drop scrolls that teach those spells, and if nobody in your party needs them, you might as well sell them off. The auction house isn't the only way to sell things though. With all of the downtime involved in the game, often while putting parties together, or in some cases even just waiting for big ability cooldowns, there's a lot of standing around. Large chunks of this game can be played in the background while doing other stuff, it turns out. You can set up a bazaar, and when players inspect you, they can check out your wares and buy stuff directly from the source, getting around any of the auction house fees. Apart from selling things and doing quests, there's a few other reasons to spend time in big cities. For starters, that's where your house is. Each player has a Mog house, which are private player housing that, for my purposes, was largely glorified bank storage, but it's also a place you can change your jobs, though it's not the only place. I never got into it, but I know you can start a garden in your house, which is a pretty low investment way to get a big profit on the auction house in the long run. With all of this stuff to do, it might take some coordination and consistent help. That's where link shells come in. These are player organizations, like guilds, that give you a dedicated chat. Interestingly, even that chat is an element of immersion, since link shells are named such because you have to carry around a literal shell, like think a conch, in your inventory to even see the chat. There's not a lot of extra mechanics going on with link shells, but it's important to find one that aligns with what you want to get out of the game, because things will get a lot easier if you have friendly folks willing to help, and you should too. Despite the fact that I've experienced well under half, probably like less than a quarter, of the content in this game, I have a lot of fond memories with Final Fantasy XI, and even now, I still have the occasional itch to experience the world of Vana'diel again, but I very much lack the time to partake in that game's admittedly very flavorful and immersive pacing. Join me tomorrow as I talk about my 108th favorite game, where I do this all again.